Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another lesson. This time we will be making the camera move and follow the player object as it moves up. In the original game, the camera goes up a little bit whenever we reach the middle of the screen, approximately. So let's go ahead and add a new game object, a sprite. We can name it half screen, and let's add a tag to it. Don't forget to go back and add a tag again. Reset the positions. And what we will be doing with this object is just checking whether the player object has reached the middle of the screen. So we won't be adding a picture to this sprite since we want it to stay invisible. Go to Add Component, Physics 2D, and add a box collider to it. Increase the size. And now we just have to move it up a little bit to the middle of the screen. So whenever the player goes up and reaches the collider right here, the camera will be moving up. Since we don't want the player to bump into this, we will set the is trigger option to enabled. Now we will need a new C# script. So right click on our scripts folder and create a new C# script. We can name it half screen check. Double click it to open it up in Visual Studio. We will introduce two new variables. The first one is going to be public, float, and we can name it camera jump speed. Set it to 19 for now. After that we want a private variable of the type rigidBody2D. And we can name it half body. We want to initialize it in the start method, so write half body equals to get component, and we want to get the rigidBody2D. Don't forget to open and close the brackets since this is a function. We can go ahead and delete the update method since we won't be using it. But instead we will be using the onTriggerStay method that we spoke about in the last lesson. So go ahead and write void onTriggerStay 2D. So now whenever something is staying in this trigger, it will be executing the code within these brackets. But we actually don't want the camera to move when any object gets into the trigger. We want it to move only if that object is the player game object. So let's go ahead and check whether the object that's staying within the trigger is the player game object. To do that we need an if statement. So if collision dot tag equals to player, since we set that tag to our player game object. Then we want to execute the code within these brackets. And what we actually want to do is we want to take the half body and we want to change the velocity just like we change the velocity of the player object when it jumps. Half body dot velocity equals to vector2 dot up, and we want to multiply it with the camera jump speed. Since this will be moving the camera too much, we also want to multiply it by 0.1 float to reduce the movement to 10%. Save this and go back to Unity. Now we want to attach this script to the half screen. Since the script is targeting a rigid body, we will also need to add a rigid body component to this object. So click Add Component, Physics 2D, Rigid Body 2D. The thing that we want to change in this rigid body is to change the body type to kinematic. That way it will only be moving once we give it a push, and it will not be falling down automatically. Let's see how it works. It's staying in the air for now, it's not falling down, and if the player object reaches the destination, it will push it up. But what we can notice now that it doesn't stop once the player axes the trigger. So we can use our newly acquired knowledge about triggers to stop it moving once the object axes the trigger. For that we'll need to call the onTriggerExit2D method, and inside we want to check if the object that has left the trigger is the player game object. Exactly the same way as we did before. So we can just copy this, and instead of reducing it to 10%, we will just reduce it to 0. That should stop the trigger from moving. Save it and let's see if it works. Perfect, but our camera still isn't moving. At least that's easy to fix. Just take the main camera object and drag it inside of the half screen object. If we try it out now, it should move perfectly. I hope you liked this lesson and that you learned something new. In the next lesson I will be teaching you how to make the player game object change colors at the beginning.